The laughter cut through the Friday night noise like breaking glass. "Would you look at that crippled mutt? Who let that thing in here?" Lieutenant Connor Mills rose from his chair, all 6 feet 3 inches of him, shoulders broad beneath a flight suit still carrying the faint chemical bite of JP-8 fuel. His boot connected with the hindquarters of the old German shepherd lying beneath a corner table, not hard enough to injure, but more than enough to humiliate. The dog did not bark, did not growl, did not flinch. It simply raised its head, brown eyes the color of aged whiskey, fixing on the pilot's face with an expression that held no fear, no submission, nothing that resembled what a kicked dog should feel. Those eyes belonged to a creature that had witnessed something far worse than a petulant lieutenant in a Nevada bar and had returned from it intact. "Sorry, he's not bothering anyone." The voice came soft from behind the bar counter, small, quiet, the kind of voice that got lost in crowded rooms and forgotten before the echo died. Amber Hayes, 5'2", narrow shoulders beneath a faded black t-shirt, brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that hadn't seen a salon in months, calloused hands wrapped around a serving tray loaded with beer bottles. A waitress, just a waitress. Connor turned toward the sound, and his lip curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "He? You call this broken-down flea bag he?" He gestured grandly toward his table, where 3 other Air Force personnel watched with varying degrees of amusement. "Does your precious dog have a rank too? Should I be saluting?" 32 people occupied Wings and Wheels that night. The bar sat 3 miles from Nellis Air Force Base, an institution older than half the pilots who drank there. Photographs of aviation legends covered every inch of wall space, not claimed by neon beer signs or vintage propellers. The air smelled of buffalo wings, spilled alcohol, and the particular musk of people who worked with machines that could break the sound barrier. In the far corner, 4 men in their 60s nursed whiskeys and watched the confrontation with narrowed eyes. Veterans. The kind who had stopped announcing their service decades ago, but never stopped carrying it. Behind the bar, Master Sergeant Silas Brennan, retired, owner and operator of Wings and Wheels for the past 15 years, set down the glass he'd been polishing. His fingers, still steady despite 72 years of use, drummed once against the wooden counter. Amber said nothing to Connor's mockery. She simply placed her hand on the German shepherd's broad head, fingers tracing a path over the fur until they found something hidden beneath. A scar, long and jagged, running from the base of the left ear down toward the thick collar around the dog's neck. The scar had a peculiar shape, not the clean line of a surgical incision or the ragged tear of a dogfight. It curved and branched in patterns that spoke of velocity, of metal fragmenting at speeds the human eye could not track. No one noticed. Not yet. But in the next 90 minutes, everything these people believed about courage, about loyalty, about the price of silence, would shatter completely. The dog's name was Rex, the waitress's name was Amber, and the truth waiting to surface would bring a lieutenant to his knees and make a colonel salute a German shepherd. Connor had already returned his attention to his table, where Captain Bianca Frost was saying something that made the group laugh. Bianca wore her blonde hair in the regulation bun required of female officers, though several strategically loose strands suggested she'd spent considerable time making it appear effortlessly imperfect. Her flight suit fit like it had been tailored, which it probably had been, and her voice carried the particular confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. "I cannot believe they let animals in here," Bianca said, loud enough to carry. "Some of us have standards." Technical Sergeant Fletcher Reeves nodded vigorously. Fletcher was the kind of man who had memorized every specification of every aircraft in the United States inventory, but had never actually flown anything more demanding than a desk chair. He compensated for this with aggressive expertise, correcting pronunciation and challenging credentials with the fervor of someone desperate to belong. "Health code violation probably," Fletcher added. "Someone should report it." The 4th member of their group, Airman First Class Blake Simmons, had already pulled out his phone. Blake was 22, fresh from technical training, and possessed the particular talent of making every situation slightly worse while maintaining plausible deniability. His fingers moved across the screen as he aimed the camera toward Rex. "This is definitely going on my story," Blake announced. Caption: "Even the service dogs at Nellis are broke. #budget cuts." At her station behind the bar, Amber continued working. She pulled bottles from the cooler, arranged them on her tray, wiped down a section of counter that didn't need wiping. Her movements were economical, efficient, and absolutely unremarkable. Silas watched her with an expression that had shifted from casual attention to something more focused. He'd hired Amber 3 months ago when she'd walked in during a lunch shift, asked if he needed help, and demonstrated an ability to memorize a 12-item order without writing anything down. She'd never mentioned where she'd worked before. He'd never asked. In the service industry, some questions stayed unspoken, but something about the way she moved had bothered him from the first day. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious. Just small things. The way she always positioned herself with her back to a wall, the way her eyes swept the room every few minutes, cataloging exits and entrances, the way she seemed to hear conversations happening 20 feet away, habits, training, the kind that didn't come from restaurant work. Amber lifted her tray and headed toward a table of regular customers, a group of civilian contractors who came in every Thursday and Friday to complain about their security clearances and overtip. She had to pass Connor's table to reach them. "Hey, waitress," she paused, professional smile. "What can I get you?" Connor leaned back in his chair, making a show of looking her up and down. "I don't know. What do you recommend? What's good here besides the, local wildlife?" His friends laughed. Bianca covered her mouth with perfectly manicured fingers, as if the joke was too delicious to fully contain. "The wings are popular," Amber said, her voice carrying no trace of reaction to the insult. "House specialty." "The wings." Connor repeated the words, as if she'd suggested he eat from a garbage can. "Fletcher, you hear that? She recommends the wings." He turned back to Amber, leaning forward now, invading her space. "Tell me something, sweetheart. You know what I do for a living?" "You're a pilot." "I'm a pilot." He said it the way other men might say I'm a god. F-16 Fighting Falcon, $37 million of American engineering, and I get to sit in the cockpit and make it dance. You know what that feels like? Amber's expression remained neutral. "I don't." "Of course you don't." Connor spread his hands magnanimously. "How could you? You pour beer, you wipe tables, that's your whole world right there. The most exciting thing that happens to you is when someone orders something that's not on the menu." Bianca leaned in. "Connor, leave the poor thing alone. She probably doesn't even know what an F-16 is." "Actually," Amber said, and then stopped herself. The table went quiet. Even Fletcher paused in his nervous fidgeting. "Actually what?" Connor prompted. Amber shook her head. "Nothing. I'll get your order started." She turned to leave, but Blake was faster. His foot shot out, catching the edge of her tray and sending it tilting. Amber adjusted instantly, weight shifting, hands rebalancing, and the tray stayed level despite the impact. Not a single bottle moved. Blake blinked. He'd expected the tray to fall. He'd wanted the crash, the embarrassment, the mess for her to clean up while they watched. Instead, the waitress had recovered with reflexes that seemed almost mechanical in their precision. "Jumpy," Blake said, trying to recover his intended joke. "Guess dropping trays is bad for tips." Amber didn't respond. She continued toward her destination, delivered the beers to the contractor table, collected their payment, and made her way back toward the bar. Her path took her past Rex, and she paused just long enough to run her fingers over his head once more. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, just once. In the corner, one of the older veterans, a man with a silver crew cut and a faded Marine Corps tattoo visible beneath his rolled shirt sleeve, leaned toward his companions. "You see that?" "See what?" "The way she caught that tray. That wasn't reflex. That was training." His friend shrugged. "Maybe she's been doing this a long time." "Maybe," but the first man kept watching, his beer forgotten on the table in front of him. Before we go further into this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank our amazing viewers. Your support means everything. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment below telling me, have you ever witnessed someone being completely underestimated before their true identity was revealed? Let's keep going. 20 minutes passed. The bar filled further as the evening deepened, off-duty personnel streaming in from the base, their Friday energy infectious. A country song played on the jukebox, something about trucks and heartbreak, and conversation rose and fell in waves. At Connor's table, the drinks kept flowing, and the mockery kept building. They had found their entertainment for the evening, and they weren't about to let it go. "Yo, waitress," Blake called out, waving his empty glass. "We need refills over here. What kind of service is this?" Amber approached with fresh bottles, her movements unhurried despite the summons. As she distributed the drinks, Fletcher decided it was his turn to join the sport. "So," he said, adjusting his glasses with an air of intellectual superiority, "this base has a lot of NATO partnerships. You speak any other languages? German, maybe? We have a lot of German exchange pilots coming through." It was a trap, and everyone at the table knew it. Fletcher had spent 2 years stationed in Ramstein and considered himself an authority on European affairs. He expected her to stumble through some high school remnant of foreign language, giving him the opportunity to correct and condescend. "Ich spreche ein wenig Deutsch," Amber replied. Her pronunciation was flawless, accent perfect, the kind of German that didn't come from classroom instruction. "Aber ich bevorzuge Englisch, wenn es Ihnen nichts ausmacht." "I speak a little German, but I prefer English, if you don't mind." Fletcher's smug expression flickered. "That's actually not bad. Where'd you learn that? Here and there?" "Here and there," Bianca repeated mockingly. "How mysterious. What else are you hiding, waitress? Secret doctorate in international relations?" Amber picked up the empty bottles from the table. "Just good at picking things up." She left before they could respond, but not before Connor caught her wrist. His grip wasn't painful, but it was firm, controlling. The kind of touch that said, "I can do what I want, and no one will stop me. Don't walk away when we're talking to you." Amber looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. Her expression hadn't changed, hadn't hardened or softened, but something in her eyes made Connor feel, for just a fraction of a second, like he'd grabbed something he shouldn't have. He released her. "Sensitive," he muttered as she walked away, "for a waitress." Under the corner table, Rex had risen to his feet. The dog stood watching the exchange, his posture shifting subtly, weight balanced, head lowered. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't threatening in any obvious way, but the old veterans in the corner noticed the change. "That's not a pet," the silver-haired Marine said quietly. "Look at how it's standing. Working dog? Working dog. Watch how it favors the left side. Protecting. It's protecting something, or someone." Across the bar, a new figure pushed through the entrance. Major Arthur Graves wore civilian clothes, khakis, and a polo shirt, but he carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of career military. 48 years old, 26 years in service, and a reputation for missing nothing. He'd come to Wings and Wheels for a quiet drink away from the base, but quiet was clearly not on the menu tonight. He chose a seat at the far end of the bar, positioning himself where he could observe the entire room, and waited for service. Silas reached him first. "Major, the usual, please." "Rough week?" Graves accepted his bourbon with a nod of thanks. "Every week's rough, Silas. That's why they pay us." He gestured with his glass toward Connor's table. "Those yours?" "Stationed here, if that's what you mean. Not mine by choice." "Lieutenant Mills?" Graves spoke the name without affection. "I've heard things." "Everyone's heard things. Question is whether anyone's going to do anything about the things." The major didn't respond. He just watched as Amber made another pass through the room, collecting empties, delivering orders, moving with that same quiet efficiency that made her nearly invisible. Nearly. Because Arthur Graves had spent his career learning to see what others missed, and something about this particular waitress didn't fit the picture. At Connor's table, the evening's entertainment was evolving. Blake had found a new target. "Hey, check this out." He held up his phone, showing a photo he had taken earlier. Rex's face filled the screen, captured mid-yawn, tongue lolling. "Look at this pathetic thing. I'm going to post this with #military_discount, because even the dogs around here are running on empty." Fletcher laughed too loud. Bianca smirked. Connor raised his glass in mock salute. None of them noticed Amber freeze 3 tables away. None of them saw her knuckles go white around the tray she was carrying. None of them registered the infinitesimal tightening around her eyes. She took a breath, then another, then continued on her route as if nothing had happened. But under the corner table, Rex had shifted position again. His eyes, those ancient amber eyes, tracked Blake's phone with an intensity that went beyond canine curiosity. The camera flash had illuminated something around Rex's neck. Hidden beneath the thick fur of his collar, half visible for less than a second, metal glinted. Dog tags. Real ones. The military kind. No one saw. Not yet. 45 minutes into the evening, Connor decided to escalate. "I'm bored," he announced, standing up and stretching elaborately. "This place needs some excitement." He grabbed his beer and wandered toward the corner table where Rex lay, the dog's head resting on his paws, eyes half closed, but ears still tracking every sound in the room. "Hey there, soldier." Connor squatted down, bringing himself to Rex's level. "What's your story? You get discharged for being too ugly?" Rex's eyes opened fully. He regarded the lieutenant with that same unsettling calm, neither afraid nor aggressive, simply present in a way that most dogs, most creatures of any kind, were incapable of. "Connor," Bianca called from their table, "leave it alone. It's just a dog. Just a dog." Connor reached out and grabbed Rex's collar, yanking the dog's head up. Wait, what's this?" His fingers had found the tags. 2 of them, standard military issue, hanging from a chain woven through the collar's fabric. "Holy cow," Connor laughed. "This mutt has actual dog tags, like real ones." He squinted at the stamped metal. What kind of person puts real military tags on their pet? That's gotta be stolen valor or something. Amber appeared beside him so quickly that even Connor, trained in situational awareness, startled at her presence. "Please let go of him." Her voice was still soft, still polite, but underneath the softness, something had hardened. Connor stood, still holding the collar. Rex rose with him, forced up by the grip, but still not fighting, not growling, just standing there with dignity intact, despite the indignity being inflicted. "Or what?" Connor tilted his head. "You going to call the manager? Oh, wait. You can't, because old Silas back there isn't going to do anything. Nobody here is going to do anything. You know why?" He leaned close enough that Amber had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Because I'm a pilot. An F-16 pilot, and you're nothing." In the corner, the silver-haired Marine rose from his seat. "That's enough, Lieutenant." Connor spun. "Excuse me, who are you?" "Sergeant Major Caleb Porter, United States Marine Corps, retired. And I'm telling you to let go of that animal before I come over there and make you." "Retired." Connor practically spat the word. "Which means you're a civilian now. Which means you can sit back down and mind your own business, old-timer." The tension in the bar had shifted. Conversations died. Glasses stopped clinking. Even the jukebox seemed quieter, the song between tracks. Major Graves set his bourbon down and began paying attention. Silas Brennan's hand moved below the bar, towards something only he knew was there. And Amber Hayes simply stood, her body positioned between Connor and Rex, small and still, and utterly unafraid. "Let him go," she repeated. "Make me." She didn't try. She just looked at him, that same flat expression she'd worn all night, the one that showed nothing and revealed nothing. Then, so quietly that only Connor could hear, she spoke again. "You have no idea what he's survived. You have no idea what I've survived. Walk away. Please." Something in her voice, some quality that went beyond the words, made Connor hesitate. For the span of 3 heartbeats, he actually considered it. Then Blake called out from the table. "Connor, stop flirting with the help and get back here. Bianca's doing shots." The spell broke. Connor released Rex's collar with a dismissive shove and swaggered back to his friends, throwing one last comment over his shoulder. "Train your dog better, sweetheart. Next time he might not be so lucky." Rex shook himself once, settling his fur, and returned to his spot beneath the corner table. Amber watched him go, her hand trembling almost imperceptibly at her side. Then she was back to work, clearing the next table, refreshing the next drink, becoming invisible again. But across the bar, 3 pairs of eyes remained fixed on her. Sergeant Major Caleb Porter, who had seen that particular kind of stillness before, in people who had stood in places where stillness was the only thing between living and dying. Master Sergeant Silas Brennan, who was beginning to suspect that his quiet waitress carried secrets far heavier than a tray of drinks. And Major Arthur Graves, who had just noticed something peculiar about the way the woman held herself when she thought no one was watching. Military bearing, unmistakable. 68 minutes remained until everything changed. The evening crawled toward its hinge point. At 11:15 p.m., a young pilot named Ethan Cole pushed through the entrance. Lieutenant Cole was 24, fresh off his qualification flights, and technically assigned to the same squadron as Connor Mills. But where Connor wore his status like a weapon, Ethan carried his like a question he was still trying to answer. He scanned the room, spotted Connor's table, and deliberately chose a seat at the bar instead. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Don't want to join your friends?" "They're not my friends." Ethan ordered a beer and stared at the television mounted in the corner, some baseball game playing to an empty audience. "Just because we fly together doesn't mean we have to drink together." "Smart kid." Silas set down the drink. "How long you been at Nellis?" 3 months, still learning where everything is. He took a sip, then gestured toward Rex. That's a beautiful dog. German Shepherd, right? Belongs to our waitress. Ethan looked at Amber, really looked, for the first time. She doesn't seem like a dog person. No, dog people hover. They check on their pets constantly. She hasn't looked at him once in the last 5 minutes, but... He paused, watching more closely. She always knows where he is. Her body angles toward him even when she's facing the other direction. Silas polished a glass that was already clean. That's an interesting observation, Lieutenant. My mom trained therapy dogs. I grew up learning to read handlers. Ethan took another drink. That woman, whoever she is, that dog isn't her pet. That's her partner. At Connor's table, the volume had increased with the alcohol consumption. Bianca was telling a story about some instructor she'd humiliated during her training days, and the others were laughing in all the right places. Then Blake dropped his drink. The glass shattered against the floor, spraying beer across a 5-foot radius. Blake cursed, standing up quickly to avoid the splash, and in his hurried movement stumbled directly into Amber. She was carrying a full tray. 6 glasses, 3 bottles, combined weight of probably 15 pounds. The collision should have sent everything flying. It didn't. Amber absorbed the impact with a twist of her hips, a micro-adjustment of her grip, and a step that turned momentum into stability. The tray stayed level, not a drop spilled. Blake stared at her. How did you... I ran straight into you. Reflexes. Amber knelt to begin cleaning the broken glass, her movements quick and precise. Without thinking, she shifted into a specific posture, one knee down, the other bent, weight balanced for rapid movement in any direction. Silas saw it. So did Caleb Porter. So did Major Graves. That wasn't a cleaning position. That was a tactical kneel. You were in the military, Major Graves said. It wasn't a question. Amber looked up, startled for the first time all evening. Her expression flickered, something passing behind her eyes before the neutral mask returned. No, sir. Just a waitress. People don't kneel like that unless they've been trained to. I must have seen it somewhere. Graves held her gaze for a long moment. Then, seemingly satisfied, he returned to his drink. But his attention remained on her, peripheral now, watching without appearing to watch. At Connor's table, Bianca had noticed the exchange. Did that officer just accuse the waitress of being military? That's hilarious. Maybe she's undercover, Fletcher suggested, laughing at his own joke. Deep cover mission, infiltrate Wings and Wheels and report on the quality of their onion rings. The rings are actually pretty good, Blake said, missing the humor entirely. Connor wasn't laughing. He was watching Amber finish cleaning the broken glass, watching the efficiency of her movements, the way she collected every shard without cutting herself even once. For the second time that evening, something like doubt flickered through him. Then it passed, drowned in beer and ego. Yo, waitress, he called. When you're done playing janitor, we need another round. Some of us have important things to celebrate. Amber rose, disposed of the glass carefully, and approached their table with fresh drinks. As she distributed them, Fletcher decided to test her again. Pop quiz, he said, pushing his glasses up. Since you apparently speak German and have mysterious reflexes, let's see what else you know. What's the maximum speed of an F-16 Fighting Falcon? Amber set down his beer. Mach 2. Fletcher's eyebrows rose. Lucky guess. That's common knowledge. Is it? Everyone knows that. Okay. She turned to leave, and Fletcher felt cheated. He'd wanted to correct her, to demonstrate his superior knowledge, and she'd denied him the opportunity by being right. Wait, he called after her. What about specific variants? What about the Block 52 with conformal fuel tanks? That affects performance parameters, you know. Amber paused. Her back was to them, so they couldn't see her expression. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, meant for herself rather than them. Block 52 with CFTs drops the max speed slightly due to increased drag, about Mach 1.8 in optimal conditions. But the extended range is worth the trade-off for long-duration missions. She said it to herself. But Silas, standing just a few feet away, heard every word. His hands stopped polishing the glass. His eyes found hers as she passed, and in them she saw a question forming. She shook her head, barely perceptible. He didn't pursue it. But he moved a little closer to the phone mounted on the wall behind the bar. At the table of retired veterans, Caleb Porter leaned toward his companions. That girl knows aircraft specifications better than the technical sergeant trying to quiz her. Could be an enthusiast, another veteran suggested. Some people just like planes. Could be, Caleb didn't sound convinced. Or she's something else entirely. Across the room, Rex had risen from his spot. The German shepherd limped toward Amber as she worked, his movement deliberate, despite the obvious discomfort in his gait. When he reached her, he pressed his body against her leg, a gesture of connection that lasted exactly 2 seconds before he returned to his corner. It was nothing, a dog seeking attention from its owner. But Ethan Cole, watching from the bar, noticed how the dog had positioned himself during those 2 seconds, between Amber and the table of pilots, shielding her blind side. "Silas," Ethan said quietly, "that dog. Is it? I feel like I've seen it somewhere before. Maybe on the street. He's around." "No, that's not..." Ethan pulled out his phone, but the battery indicator blinked red. "For crying out loud. Does this place have a charger?" Outlet by the bathroom. Ethan left to resurrect his phone, a theory forming in his mind that he couldn't quite articulate yet. Meanwhile, the temperature at Connor's table was rising. The alcohol had reached that tipping point where confidence became belligerence and entertainment became cruelty. "I have an idea," Bianca announced, her words slightly slurred. "Let's make things interesting." She pulled a stack of bills from her wallet, fanning them out. $500 says our waitress can't field strip an M9 pistol." Fletcher laughed nervously. "Bianca, we don't have an M9. "I know that. It's a theoretical bet." She raised her voice. "Hey, waitress, come here." Amber approached, caution evident in her slower pace. "Can I help you?" "My friend here thinks you're secretly some kind of military expert." Bianca's smile was predatory. "So, let's test it. I've got $500 that says you couldn't disassemble a service pistol if your life depended on it. You want to take that bet?" "I don't gamble." "Of course you don't." Bianca's tone dripped condescension. "Because you know you'd lose. Because, despite your little German phrases and your airplane factoids, you're still just a girl who pours drinks for people better than her." Amber's hand tightened on her tray. "Will there be anything else?" "Actually, yes." Blake stood up, blocking her path. "I want to know something. Why do you even have that dog here? This is a bar, not a kennel. What's so special about him that he gets to lie around taking up space?" "He's my companion." "Your companion," Blake snorted. "You mean your emotional support animal? Let me guess. You have anxiety, depression, some made-up condition that lets you bring pets wherever you want?" "Blake," Fletcher said, a warning in his voice that went unheeded. "No, seriously, I'm curious." Blake stepped closer. "What possible reason could you have for dragging a half-dead dog into a bar every night? He can barely walk. He's probably in pain. Keeping him alive is just selfish at this point." Something changed in Amber's face, a shift so subtle that only someone watching very closely would have caught it. She was watching closely. Major Graves was watching closely. So was Silas, and Caleb, and in the corner, Rex himself raised his head as if responding to a frequency only he could hear. "He's earned his rest," Amber said quietly. "Every step he takes, he's earned." "Earned?" Blake laughed. "Earned what? By being old and useless?" Amber's eyes met his, and for just a moment the mask slipped. Beneath it was something cold and deep and very, very tired. By saving lives. By protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. By refusing to quit when everything was telling him to give up. Her voice was still soft, but it had acquired an edge like folded steel. "You want to know what's special about him? He's the bravest soul I've ever known, and he'd die for me without a second thought. The same way he almost did once already." The table went silent. Even Connor, even Bianca, felt the weight of something they couldn't identify. Then Blake laughed, shattering the moment. "Wow. Drama queen much? It's just a dog." Amber turned and walked away. Behind her, she heard them resume their mockery, their jokes, their casual cruelty. She heard Blake say something about crazy waitresses and their delusions. She heard Connor compare her to other women he'd encountered, who were too emotional to function in the real world. She kept walking. At the bar, she set down her tray and pressed both palms flat against the counter, breathing slowly. Silas appeared beside her. "You all right?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." "Then stop looking." She regretted the words immediately. "I'm sorry. That was uncalled for." "You've got nothing to apologize for." Silas's voice dropped lower. "Listen to me. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you came from. But I know what quiet strength looks like, and you've got more of it than anyone I've seen in 30 years. Those kids over there, they don't matter. They're noise, you understand? Just noise. Amber nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Now, Silas continued, there's an older gentleman at the end of the bar who has been watching you like he's trying to solve a puzzle. Major Graves. You know him? No. Well, he seems to think he knows you, or knows something about you. Silas paused. Is there anything I should be prepared for tonight? Amber looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time without her mask fully in place. What he saw there surprised him. Not fear, not anger, but something that looked almost like grief. I don't know, she admitted. I really don't know. Major Graves chose that moment to signal for another drink. Amber straightened, composed herself, and went to serve him. Bourbon again, sir? Please. He watched her pour with those analytical eyes. I have a question for you, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. Amber set down the bottle. I'll do my best. That dog of yours, where did he get that scar on his neck? She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. An accident. Years ago. What kind of accident leaves a scar shaped like that? Because I've seen injuries, more than I'd like to count, and that particular pattern, he tapped his own neck. That comes from high-velocity fragmentation. Shrapnel, to be specific. Amber's hand trembled, just for a moment. With respect, sir, I'm just a waitress. I wouldn't know about things like that. Graves studied her face. Then, deliberately, he pulled out his wallet and showed her something inside. A photograph. Old, faded, creased from years of being carried. It showed a group of soldiers in desert fatigues, faces young and tired and triumphant. That's my son, Graves said, pointing to one of the figures. Marcus Graves. He was a crew chief. Lost him in Afghanistan, 2012. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. He tucked his photo away. The reason I mention it, the reason I carry this with me everywhere, is because I never got to tell him how proud I was. I was too busy being military, too busy being proper, too busy following protocol. His voice hardened slightly. So, when I see someone who is obviously carrying something heavy, I don't stay quiet anymore. I ask. Because maybe one day, someone asking is all that person needs. He held her gaze, waiting. Amber opened her mouth to respond, and then someone screamed. The sound came from near the entrance, where a man in his 50s had collapsed to the floor. He'd been walking toward the bathroom when his legs gave out, his hand clutching his chest, his face gray. Call 911! Someone shouted. Chaos erupted. People stood, crowded, got in each other's way. Someone knocked over a chair. Someone else dropped a glass. Amber moved. She didn't run, didn't push, didn't panic. She simply flowed through the crowd like water through rocks, arriving at the fallen man's side before anyone else had processed what was happening. Her hands found his neck, checking for pulse. Her eyes scanned his face, his skin color, the pattern of his breathing. He's not having a heart attack, she announced, her voice cutting through the noise with calm authority. His pulse is strong, breathing's labored but steady. This looks like a syncope episode, probably blood pressure related. She looked up at the crowd. Someone get me a cold cloth and keep his legs elevated. Silas was there with the cloth in seconds. Amber placed it on the man's forehead while simultaneously adjusting his position. Sir, can you hear me? I need you to focus on my voice. You're going to be fine, but I need you to breathe slowly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. The man's eyes fluttered open. His color was already improving. What happened? You fainted. Probably stood up too fast after sitting for a while. Combined with alcohol and dehydration, it's not uncommon. She checked his pulse again. You're stabilizing, but I'd recommend getting checked out by a doctor tonight. Do you have someone who can drive you? His wife, who had been standing frozen near their table, rushed forward. I can drive. Is he going to be okay? He should be, but better safe than sorry. Keep him hydrated, monitor his symptoms, and if anything changes, don't wait for an ambulance. Get him to an ER immediately. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later. By then, the man was sitting up, drinking water, and his wife was alternating between thanking Amber and crying from relief. The EMT who took over looked at Amber with professional appreciation. You the one who stabilized him? I just helped. You did more than help. That assessment was spot on. You have medical training? Just common sense? The EMT didn't look convinced, but he had a patient to transport. The couple left with repeated gratitude, and the bar slowly returned to its previous equilibrium. But the equilibrium had shifted. At Connor's table, the four pilots sat in unusual silence. They had watched the entire scene unfold. They had seen their waitress transform from invisible servant to commanding presence in the span of seconds. They had seen her knowledge, her calm, her efficiency. Fletcher spoke first. That wasn't just first aid. No, Bianca agreed quietly. That was TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care. How would a waitress know TCCC protocol? Blake asked. No one had an answer. At the bar, Dr. Fiona Wells had risen from her seat. Fiona was a veterinarian assigned to the military working dog unit at Nellis, and she had watched Amber's performance with the trained eye of someone who recognized clinical competence. "Excuse me," she said, approaching Amber. "That was impressive." Amber was washing her hands, scrubbing them with the particular thoroughness that spoke of ingrained habit. "Thank you. I'm serious. The way you assessed that patient, the way you communicated with him, your checklist approach to symptoms, that doesn't come from TV or basic CPR classes." Fiona tilted her head. "That comes from treating casualties in the field. I've picked up a lot of random knowledge over the years." "Random knowledge," Fiona almost smiled. "Is that what we're calling it?" Before Amber could respond, a commotion drew their attention back to Connor's table. Blake was holding something up, displaying it with triumphant malice. A small leather bag, the kind used for personal items. Amber's bag. "Look what I found behind the bar," Blake announced. "Since our waitress likes to pretend she's all mysterious, let's see what she's actually carrying around." Amber's face went pale. "That's my property." "Is it?" Blake upended the bag onto the table. A wallet, keys, lip balm, and various mundane items scattered across the surface. And there, mixed among them, something that caught the light. A challenge coin, worn around the edges, obviously carried for years. The kind of token that meant more to its owner than any amount of money. Blake picked it up, examining it. "What's this? Some kind of souvenir?" "Give that back!" Amber's voice had changed. The softness was gone, replaced by something harder, something that made Fletcher shift uncomfortably in his seat. "Why?" Blake turned the coin over. "It's just a cheap piece of metal. What could possibly—" He squinted at the inscription. "Wait, wait, wait, wait!" His mockery died mid-sentence. "Night Stalkers," he read slowly. 1/60th SOAR. He looked up at Amber, then back at the coin. "This is a special operations coin. This is a real special operations coin." The bar had gone quiet again. At his position by the wall, Major Graves had risen to his feet. "Airman Simmons," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command even in civilian clothes. "Give me that coin, now." Blake hesitated. "Sir, I gave you an order, Airman." The use of rank did what nothing else could. Blake's hand trembled as he extended the coin toward the Major. Graves took it, examined it, read the inscription on the back, his lips moving silently. "A.H. Operation Valkyrie, 2019. His head snapped up, eyes finding Amber with new intensity. "Where did you get this?" Amber's mask was cracking. Beneath it, something raw was bleeding through. "It was given to me." "By whom?" She said nothing. "This coin," Graves continued, stepping closer, "was minted for a specific operation, a classified operation. The people who received these coins, I can count them on one hand." His voice dropped lower. "A.H. What does that stand for?" The bar held its breath. Amber looked at the Major, at the coin in his hand, at the eyes of everyone watching. She looked at Rex, who had risen from his corner and was limping toward her with purpose. "It stands for someone who doesn't exist anymore," she finally said. "It stands for someone who died a long time ago." "Did she?" Graves asked. "Did she really?" We're at the halfway point of this incredible story, and I promise you, what happens next will give you chills. If you're enjoying this, please take 1 second to hit that like button. It helps more people discover stories like these, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Trust me, you'll want to talk about this ending. Now, back to the story. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Connor, driven by some combination of alcohol, wounded pride, and the desperate need to reassert control, pushed back his chair and strode toward Amber. "This is ridiculous," he declared. "She's messing with us. That coin is probably fake, bought off some military surplus website. She's been playing games all night, making us look stupid, and I'm done with it." "Lieutenant Mills," Graves's voice carried warning, Stand down. With all due respect, sir, you're not in uniform and neither am I. This isn't a military matter, Connor pointed at Amber. This is some waitress who's been jerking us around. She probably stole that coin from someone, probably stole those dog tags too. His eyes narrowed. What else are you hiding? What else did you take from real soldiers so you could play pretend? Amber didn't respond. She simply stood there, Rex pressed against her leg, her face an unreadable mask. Nothing to say? Connor stepped closer. All that smart talk earlier, all those knowing looks, and now you're quiet? Maybe because you know I'm right. Maybe because you know you're about to get caught. Connor, stop. Bianca's voice held uncertainty now, doubt that hadn't been there before. Maybe we should just what? Let her keep lying? Let her disrespect the real military, the people who actually serve? Connor was inches from Amber now, using his height to loom over her. My father was Air Force. My grandfather was Air Force. I've earned my place in this uniform. What have you earned? What gives you the right to carry that coin like you belong? Amber's eyes met his. In them, Connor saw something that made him hesitate, an ancient weariness, a sorrow that ran deeper than anything he'd encountered in his 26 years of privileged existence. You want to know what I've earned? Her voice was barely above a whisper. You really want to know? Yeah. Connor's confidence was wavering, but he'd committed too far to back down. Enlighten me. Amber looked past him, at the room full of watching eyes, at Silas behind the bar, at Caleb Porter in the corner, at Major Graves holding her challenge coin. I earned the right to stay silent, she said. I earned the right to keep my past to myself. I earned the right to live quietly, to work a normal job, to have a dog who loves me without anyone asking questions. Her voice cracked just slightly. I earned all of that with blood, with years that I'll never get back, with memories that wake me up at 3 a.m. screaming. She stepped closer to Connor, and somehow, despite being nearly a foot shorter, she seemed to grow. But you don't want to hear about what I've earned. You want to feel superior. You want to believe that because you wear a flight suit, because you sit in a cockpit, because you can drop bombs on people you'll never see, that makes you special. Her eyes bored into his. It doesn't. The uniform is just cloth. The rank is just metal. What makes a soldier isn't what they wear, it's what they're willing to sacrifice. Connor's hand shot out, grabbing her collar. Don't you lecture me, you little... What happened next would be replayed in memory, in conversation, in the quiet moments before sleep, by everyone present for years to come. Rex moved. The old dog, the limping dog, the creature they had dismissed as broken and useless, launched himself between Connor and Amber with a speed that contradicted everything his body suggested was possible. He didn't attack. He didn't bite. He simply inserted himself into the space between them, forcing Connor to release his grip or fall over a 70-pound obstacle. Connor stumbled backward. Rex stood his ground, positioning himself exactly as he'd been trained to do, exactly as he'd done 100 times before, in situations far more dangerous than a bar confrontation. Protective posture, warning stance, the clear, unmistakable body language of a military working dog executing his primary function. Holy cow, someone breathed. That's not a pet, Caleb Porter said, rising to his feet. That's a working dog. That's an actual military K9. The room had gone electric. Phone cameras emerged. People pressed closer for a better view. Connor, regaining his balance, felt something distinct. Felt something snap inside him, the humiliation of being stopped by a dog, of being shown up in front of his peers, of having his dominance challenged by an animal he'd kicked earlier that evening. He lunged forward, not at Rex, at Amber. His hands found her collar again, yanking hard, trying to drag her toward him, trying to reassert control through sheer physical force. Her shirt tore. The fabric, old and worn, gave way along the shoulder seam, exposing skin that hadn't seen public view in years. And there, on her left shoulder, illuminated by the harsh bar lights, was something that changed everything. A tattoo. An F-16 Fighting Falcon, rendered in precise detail, wings swept back in the aggressive posture of combat flight. Below it, words in military font, Ghost Rider, and beneath that, smaller but unmistakable, 160 The Soar, Night Stalkers, and beneath even that, 2 dates, a beginning and an end. Connor's hands fell away. The room stopped breathing. For 3 full seconds, no one moved, no one spoke, no one even seemed to exist. There was only the tattoo, only the truth it represented, only the dawning realization of what they had done. Somewhere in the distance, a glass dropped. The sound of it shattering was the only noise in the universe. Then Dr. Fiona Wells whispered, "Oh my goodness." Then Silas Brennan put his hand over his heart. Then Caleb Porter came to attention, his old body remembering positions it hadn't assumed in decades. And then Major Arthur Graves spoke, his voice carrying the weight of revelation. "Ghost Rider," he said the name like a prayer. "Captain Amber Hayes, Operation Valkyrie, March 2019. He snapped to attention. His hand rose in a salute, perfect and precise. "You're the pilot who single-handedly provided air cover for the convoy, 47 vehicles, 6 hours of continuous engagement against enemy positions. You were hit, you were injured, and you refused to break off." Amber stood frozen, her torn shirt hanging from her shoulder, her secret exposed to a room full of strangers. "And that dog," Graves's voice cracked. "That dog is Sergeant Rex, the only K-9 in Air Force history authorized to ride in an F-16 cockpit. Because when your aircraft went down, when you were ordered to eject, he was there. And when he was ordered to jump, he refused." The voice came from Caleb Porter. The old Marine had tears streaming down his weathered face. "I know because I was there." He stepped forward, each movement deliberate. "I was the door gunner on the Black Hawk that picked you up. 6 hours you were in that cockpit. 6 hours with that dog lying on top of you, keeping pressure on your wounds, keeping you conscious." He stopped in front of Amber, close enough to touch, but maintaining the distance of respect. "You didn't recognize me earlier. Why would you? You were barely conscious when we pulled you out, but I'd know that dog anywhere." He looked down at Rex. "I'd know those eyes anywhere. They're the same eyes that watched me carry you to the bird, watched me like he was daring me to drop you." Rex's tail wagged once, just once. The bar erupted, not in chaos, but in emotion. People standing, some crying, some saluting, phones recording from every angle. The country song on the jukebox had given way to silence, but no one noticed because the silence was louder than any music. Connor Mills stood paralyzed, his face the color of ash. Beside him, Bianca had both hands over her mouth, mascara running down her cheeks. Fletcher was bent over, hands on his knees, looking like he might be sick. Blake had backed against the wall, trying to disappear into it. "I don't," Connor's voice emerged as a croak. "I didn't know." "No." Amber's voice was quiet but carried through the room. "You didn't, and you didn't bother to find out. You saw what you wanted to see. A waitress, a nobody, someone you could mock to make yourself feel bigger." She looked around at the faces watching her, at the phones recording, at the tears and the salutes and the shock. "I didn't want this," she said. "I just wanted to live quietly, to work, to take care of him." Her hand found Rex's head. "He gave everything he had for me. The least I could do was give him peace." Major Graves lowered his salute but remained at attention. "Captain Hayes, I have to ask, why here? Why this job?" Amber was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had held a secret for far too long. "Because I couldn't be up there anymore." She gestured vaguely upward. "After what happened, after what we went through, I couldn't get back in a cockpit. The doctors called it operational stress. I called it knowing too much." Her fingers traced the scar on Rex's neck. "And he couldn't serve anymore either. His injuries, my injuries, we were both medically retired. Two broken things that only worked when we were together." She managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So, I came here, a base town, where I could still be close to the planes, still hear them overhead, still remember what it felt like to matter." The smile faded. "I just didn't expect to matter quite like this." From the doorway, a new voice cut through the emotional atmosphere. "Captain Amber Hayes!" Everyone turned. A man in a colonel's uniform stood silhouetted against the night, his posture radiating the kind of authority that required no announcement. "I'm Colonel James Wright." He stepped into the bar, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Amber. "Commander, 326th Fighter Group. And I've been looking for you for a very long time." Colonel James Wright moved through the bar like a ship parting water, the crowd instinctively creating space for him. His uniform was crisp despite the late hour, ribbons aligned with mathematical precision, eagles gleaming on his shoulders. This was not a man who made social visits. Behind him, two more figures entered. A woman in civilian clothes carrying a leather briefcase, and a younger officer whose nervous energy suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Wright stopped 3 feet from Amber, his eyes taking in the torn shirt, the exposed tattoo, the old dog pressed against her leg. His expression remained unreadable, the practiced neutrality of someone who had delivered both commendations and condolences with equal composure. "Captain Hayes," he said again, "or do you prefer Ms. Hayes now?" Amber's hand still rested on Rex's head. "I haven't been a captain in 5 years, sir." "Technically incorrect. You were medically retired, not discharged. Your commission remains on reserve status." Wright glanced around the bar, at the phones still recording, at the faces still processing shock. "Perhaps we should have this conversation somewhere more private. With respect, Colonel, I think the private part of my life ended about 3 minutes ago." Something that might have been appreciation flickered across Wright's face. "Fair enough." He turned to address the room, his voice carrying the authority of command. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption to your evening. What you've witnessed here tonight is the accidental exposure of a decorated combat veteran who has earned the right to her privacy. I would ask, as a personal favor, that you exercise discretion in how you share what you've seen." No one lowered their phones. Wright hadn't expected them to. He turned back to Amber. "I came here tonight because my office received a call about an incident involving one of my pilots and a civilian." His eyes found Connor Mills, who seemed to shrink under the attention. "Lieutenant Mills, would you care to explain why I'm standing in a bar at 23:45 hours instead of home with my family?" Connor's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. "I see." Wright's tone could have frozen jet fuel. "Then perhaps Captain Hayes can illuminate me." Amber shook her head. "It doesn't matter, sir. It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." Wright repeated the word as if testing its weight. "Captain, your shirt is torn. Your personal effects were apparently searched without consent. And according to the call I received from Master Sergeant Brennan here, you've been subjected to sustained harassment for the past several hours." He paused. "That doesn't sound like a misunderstanding. That sounds like conduct unbecoming." From his position against the wall, Blake Simmons made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Sir," Major Graves stepped forward, "I witnessed most of tonight's events. I can provide a full report." "I'm sure you can, Arthur. And I'm sure it will make for interesting reading." Wright's attention remained fixed on Amber. "But right now, I'm more interested in why one of the most decorated pilots in Night Stalker history is serving drinks in a bar 3 miles from my base, and why nobody told me she was here." The question hung in the air. Amber seemed to consider several responses before settling on the simplest truth. "Because I didn't want to be found, sir. Because I wanted to be invisible." "And how's that working out for you?" Despite everything, Amber almost smiled. "Not great, apparently." Wright nodded slowly. Then he did something that made everyone in the bar catch their breath. He extended his hand, not for a handshake, palm up, fingers spread, in the universal gesture of offering. "Captain Hayes, I didn't come here just because of tonight's incident. I came because I've been trying to locate you for 8 months." He reached into his jacket with his other hand and produced a manila folder. "There's something you need to know. Something that changes everything about what happened to you in 2019. Amber stared at the folder like it contained a live snake. "I don't understand." "You will." Wright set the folder on the nearest table. "But first, I need to deal with some personnel matters." He turned toward Connor's group, and his voice dropped to a temperature that made the Nevada desert feel tropical. "Lieutenant Mills, Airman Simmons, you will report to my office at 0600 hours tomorrow morning. You will bring your dress uniforms. You will be prepared to explain your actions tonight in detail." Connor found his voice. "Sir, I didn't know who she was. If you had known, you would have treated her with respect." Wright cut him off. "That's the problem, Lieutenant. Respect shouldn't require a resume. Decency shouldn't require credentials." He stepped closer to Connor, and though the colonel was shorter by several inches, he somehow managed to look down at the young pilot. That woman saved 47 vehicles full of American soldiers. She flew for 6 hours with shrapnel in her body because there was no one else to provide cover. And when her aircraft went down, when she had every right to eject and save herself, she stayed in that cockpit because her partner couldn't jump. Wright's voice hardened further. "And you kicked her dog. You mocked her service. You assaulted her in front of 30 witnesses." He shook his head. "I don't care if she was a waitress or a 4-star general. What you did tonight was wrong, and you knew it was wrong while you were doing it. Connor's face had progressed from ash-colored to something approaching green. Sir, save it for tomorrow. Wright dismissed him with a gesture and turned to Bianca and Fletcher. Captain Frost, Technical Sergeant Reeves, you're not named in the complaint, but your presence and participation are noted. Consider this your official counseling. Whatever ambitions you have for your careers, remember that reputation is built in moments like these. He paused. You're dismissed, all of you. The 4 pilots didn't need to be told twice. They gathered their things with the frantic efficiency of people fleeing a burning building, avoiding eye contact with everyone as they made their way to the exit. Connor paused at the door, looking back at Amber one final time. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded hollow, but something in his eyes suggested he might actually mean them. I really am sorry. Then he was gone, and the bar felt larger in his absence. Wright waited until the door closed before turning back to Amber. His demeanor softened, the commanding officer giving way to something more human. Please, he said, gesturing to a chair. Sit down. This is going to be difficult to hear. Amber sat. Rex immediately positioned himself at her feet, his body pressed against her legs. Silas appeared with a glass of water, which she accepted with a grateful nod. The colonel took the seat across from her, placing the manila folder between them. Operation Valkyrie, he began. March 15th, 2019. You were flying close air support for a convoy transiting through the hostile territory. Enemy forces ambushed the convoy, and you provided cover for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. During that engagement, your aircraft sustained critical damage. You were ordered to eject. I remember, Amber said quietly. You refused the order because Sergeant Rex was in your cockpit, and the canine ejection system had malfunctioned. You stayed with your aircraft, sustained additional injuries, and crash-landed in a relatively controlled descent. Rex kept you alive until rescue arrived. Wright paused. That's the official record. That's what happened. No. Wright opened the folder. That's what we thought happened. Until 6 months ago, when we recovered your aircraft's black box from the crash site. Amber's hand stopped halfway to her water glass. The black box was destroyed in the crash. That's what I was told. That's what everyone was told. Turns out it was ejected before impact and landed nearly a kilometer away. A shepherd found it while looking for a lost goat. It took months to work through diplomatic channels to get it back. Wright slid a sheet of paper across the table. Captain Hayes, your aircraft wasn't shot down by enemy fire. The words didn't make sense. Amber stared at them, stared at the colonel, waiting for the punchline. I don't understand. Your aircraft was sabotaged. Wright's voice was gentle but firm. The damage you sustained, the reason your ejection system failed, the reason Rex's emergency extraction didn't function, none of that was combat damage. Someone tampered with your plane before you ever took off. The bar had gone absolutely silent. Even the people who had been recording had lowered their phones, sensing that this moment was too sacred for social media. Sabotaged, Amber repeated. The word felt foreign in her mouth. By who? That's what we're trying to determine. The black box data shows that specific systems were disabled in a way that couldn't have happened accidentally. Whoever did this had access to your aircraft, had technical knowledge, and had a reason to want you specifically to fail that mission. Amber's hand found Rex's fur, gripping tighter than she realized. The dog didn't flinch. Someone tried to kill me. Yes. Someone on my own side. Yes. The silence stretched. Amber's mind raced through memories she'd spent 5 years trying to bury. The pre-flight checks she'd done herself, the maintenance crews she'd trusted, the briefings, the handshakes, the faces of people she'd called friends. The investigation, she finally said. Who knows about this? At the moment, a very small circle, myself, the Pentagon team reviewing the evidence, and now you. Wright leaned forward. Captain Hayes, whoever did this may still be serving. They may be at this base for all we know. That's why we've been trying to find you. That's why I need you to come in and help us identify who had access to your aircraft that night. Amber looked down at Rex. The old dog looked back at her with those ancient eyes, the eyes that had watched her bleed, watched her fight, watched her refuse to give up. Someone tried to kill us, Rex, she whispered, and they're still out there. Rex's response was a low growl, the first truly aggressive sound he'd made all night. It wasn't directed at anyone in the bar. It was directed at a memory, at a betrayal, at an enemy that had no face. Caleb Porter moved closer, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. Captain Hayes, I know this is a lot to take in, but if there's anything I can do to help, anything at all, you just say the word. Silas nodded from behind the bar. Same goes for me. This place, these people, we take care of our own. Around the room, others voiced their agreement. The civilian contractors, the off-duty personnel, the retired veterans who had watched the evening unfold with growing respect. Dr. Fiona Wells stepped forward. Captain Hayes, I'm the senior veterinarian for the Military Working Dog Program at Nellis. I'd like to offer my services for Rex, free of charge, for as long as he needs. That's kind of you, but his injuries are old. There's not much that can be done. Actually, Fiona said carefully, there's a new treatment protocol we've been developing. Regenerative therapy for working dogs with chronic injuries. It's still experimental, but the early results are promising. She looked at Rex with professional assessment. His gait suggests damage to the left shoulder and hip. If you're willing, I'd like to examine him, see if he's a candidate. Amber looked at Rex, then back at Fiona. You think you could help him? I think we could try. He's earned that much, wouldn't you say? For the first time since her secret had been exposed, something like hope flickered across Amber's face. Yeah, she said softly. Yeah, he has. Colonel Wright rose from his seat. Captain Hayes, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask, will you help us? Will you come in, review the evidence, help us identify who might have done this? Amber was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a new quality, something harder, something that had been sleeping for 5 years and was now waking up. Someone tried to kill me and Rex. That game, they nearly succeeded, and for 5 years, I thought it was just bad luck. Enemy fire, the cost of doing business. She stood, and despite her small stature, despite the torn shirt and the emotional exhaustion, she radiated something that made everyone in the room straighten unconsciously. I've been hiding, Colonel, running from what happened, from who I used to be, pretending I could be normal. She looked around the bar, at the faces watching her, at the phones that had long since stopped recording. I can't do that anymore. Whoever did this didn't just try to kill a pilot. They tried to kill a dog who never did anything but love his job and protect his partner. They tried to leave 47 vehicles without air cover in hostile territory. Her jaw tightened. That's not just attempted murder. That's treason. Wright nodded slowly. So, you'll help us? I'll do more than help. Amber's hand rested on Rex's head. I'll find them myself if I have to. The colonel almost smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. There's something else I need to discuss with you, but perhaps this isn't the venue. He glanced around the bar. My office, tomorrow afternoon, 1400 hours. There's a position I'd like you to consider. A position? Chief Instructor, Fighter Weapons School. We need someone who can teach the next generation what it really means to fly. Someone who's been through the worst and come back. He paused. Someone who knows that the uniform is just cloth and the rank is just metal. He was quoting her own words back to her. Amber felt something shift in her chest, something that had been frozen for a very long time beginning to thaw. I'll be there, she said. Outstanding. Wright turned to address the room one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience tonight. I trust you'll remember what you've witnessed, not the conflict, but the character. This woman served her country with distinction, and she deserves your respect regardless of what she does for a living. He moved toward the exit, then paused. One more thing. I've taken the liberty of arranging something. He nodded to the woman who had accompanied him, who opened her briefcase and produced a small velvet box. Sergeant Rex, in recognition of extraordinary valor and faithful service above and beyond the call of duty, it is my honor to inform you that you have been approved for the Distinguished Service Medal. He opened the box, revealing the medal nestled in white satin. The formal ceremony will be next week, but I wanted you to know tonight. He looked at Amber. Both of you. Amber's composure finally cracked. Tears she'd been holding back for 5 years began to fall, and she didn't try to stop them. He'd like that, she managed. He'd like that very much. Wright nodded, placed the box in her hands, and departed with his entourage. The bar door swung shut behind him, and for a moment, no one moved. Then Silas Brennan did something he'd never done in 15 years of running Wings and Wheels. He poured drinks on the house. What an incredible journey we've been on together. If this story moved you, Please subscribe and join our community of over 2 million viewers who love stories about hidden heroes. Turn on notifications so you're the first to know when the next story drops. And comment below what moment hit you the hardest. I read every single comment. Thank you for watching. The next hour passed in a blur of handshakes, embraces, and stories exchanged. Veterans who had stayed silent all evening came forward to share their own experiences, their own struggles with returning to civilian life, their own understanding of what Amber had endured. Fletcher Reeves returned alone, having apparently separated from the others. He approached Amber with the hesitant body language of someone expecting rejection. "Captain Hayes, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I needed to say this in person." He swallowed hard. "I've spent my whole career feeling like I had to prove I belonged. I never flew combat. I never deployed. I just maintained aircraft and memorized specifications and pretended that made me part of something." His voice cracked. "Tonight, I saw what real service looks like, and I saw what a real coward looks like. I was the coward." Amber studied him for a long moment. "What's your name again?" "Fletcher Reeves, Technical Sergeant. Technical Sergeant Reeves." She spoke the words carefully. "The people who maintain the aircraft are the ones who keep pilots alive. Every bolt you tighten, every system you check, every hour you spend making sure everything works. That's service. That matters." "But I wasn't—" "You weren't what? Brave?" Amber shook her head. "Bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. You came back here tonight. You apologized. That took courage." Fletcher's eyes were wet. "Thank you, Captain. Thank you." He left, and Amber watched him go with an expression that might have been compassion. Bianca Frost appeared next, her earlier composure entirely absent. Without makeup, with her hair falling loose from its regulation bun, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more human. "I wanted to be like you," she said without preamble. "First female pilot in my family. I thought I had to be tough, had to be mean, had to prove I deserved my seat." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, I just became everything I hated about the men who doubted me." "It's easy to become what you fight against," Amber said. "I've done it too. How do I stop?" Amber considered the question. "Start by being the person you needed when you were struggling, the one who helps instead of tears down, the one who sees potential instead of competition." Bianca nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "I'm sorry for all of it." "I know." She left, and Amber felt something release in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it. The last to approach was Ethan Cole, the young pilot who had chosen to sit at the bar rather than join his squad mates. "Captain Hayes, I just wanted to say, I knew something was different about you. From the moment I saw how Rex moved, how you moved, I knew." He pulled out his phone, now charged. "I finally figured out where I'd seen him before, the Air Force Museum. There's a whole exhibit about the K-9 program, and Rex's picture is on the wall. I just couldn't place it until now." Amber looked at the photo on his screen. It showed a younger Rex standing proudly beside an F-16, his handler's face obscured by a helmet visor. "That was a long time ago," she said softly. "It was yesterday, as far as history is concerned." Ethan put his phone away. "I'm new to Nellis, still figuring out who I want to be as a pilot, but I know one thing for sure. I don't want to be like Connor Mills. I want to be the kind of pilot who remembers that everyone has a story. That's a good start. Would you—" He hesitated. "Would you be willing to talk sometime about what it was like up there? The real stuff, not the official reports?" Amber looked at him, at his earnest face, at the genuine curiosity in his eyes. She saw herself in him, the young pilot she'd once been, hungry for wisdom from those who had walked the path first. "Come by the bar next week," she said. "If I'm not here, I'll be at the base. Colonel Wright seems to think I have a job waiting for me." Ethan's face lit up. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." He practically bounced out of the bar, and Amber found herself smiling despite everything. The crowd had thinned. Most of the Friday night regulars had departed, leaving behind only the truly committed drinkers and those too invested in the evening's drama to leave. Caleb Porter remained, nursing a whiskey at the corner table where his veteran friends had sat. He caught Amber's eye and raised his glass in silent salute. She walked over and sat across from him. "You were really there," she said, "on the Black Hawk." "I was really there." Caleb's eyes grew distant. "We got the call that a pilot was down, Ejection failed, possibly wounded. By the time we reached the coordinates, we thought we were doing body recovery. He took a long sip. Then we saw the smoke from your flare, and we knew you were still fighting. I don't remember much after the crash. You wouldn't. You were in and out of consciousness. But Rex never stopped watching, never stopped positioning himself between you and any perceived threat. Caleb pulled out his wallet and extracted a worn photograph. I took this when we got you on the bird. Didn't know if you'd make it. Figured someone should document what happened. The photo showed Amber strapped to a stretcher, her face pale and bloody, an oxygen mask covering her mouth. And there, lying across her chest, was Rex, his body shielding her vital organs, his head resting on her shoulder, his eyes fixed on the camera with an expression that said, "Try to move me." Amber's hand shook as she took the photograph. I never knew this existed. I've carried it for 5 years. Showed it to my grandkids when they asked what bravery looks like. Caleb reached across and gently closed her fingers around the photo. You keep it. It belongs to you. She couldn't speak, could only nod, tears streaming freely now. Caleb stood, placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, and walked out into the Nevada night. Silas appeared with 2 glasses, whiskey for him, water for her. Heck of an evening, he said, settling into the chair Caleb had vacated. Amber laughed, a sound that surprised them both. That's one word for it. You going to take the job, the instructor position? I think so. It feels like maybe there's a reason I ended up here. Like maybe all of this was supposed to happen. That's called faith, Captain. Don't let anyone tell you it's weakness. They sat in comfortable silence, the bar quiet around them. Rex had fallen asleep at Amber's feet, his breathing deep and steady. Can I ask you something? Silas said eventually. Of course. When you came in here 3 months ago looking for work, did you know that I served under your father? Amber went still. How did you know that? I didn't, not at first. But when Major Graves mentioned General Hayes, some things clicked into place. Silas swirled his whiskey. Your father was my commanding officer in Desert Storm. Best leader I ever served under. When his daughter walked into my bar, I should have recognized the resemblance. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. I didn't know you knew him. I didn't know you were his daughter. Silas smiled. Funny how the world works, isn't it? All these connections we don't see until we're forced to look. Amber thought about that. About the web of relationships that had converged in this one place, on this one night. Her father's legacy, Caleb's presence, Wright's investigation, Connor's cruelty, Rex's devotion, all of it threaded together in ways that defied coincidence. Silas, can I ask you something? Anything. The sabotage, my aircraft, do you think... She struggled to form the question. Do you think my father knew? That someone wanted me dead? Silas was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Your father loved you more than anything in this world. If he'd known someone was plotting against you, he would have moved heaven and earth to stop them. He paused. But he was also a general. He had enemies. People who would hurt his daughter to hurt him. The implication hung in the air between them. You think someone targeted me because of him? I think it's possible. I think Colonel Wright probably thinks so too. Silas finished his whiskey. But that's speculation. What matters now is finding the truth. The door opened, admitting a gust of cool desert air. Amber looked up to see Colonel Wright returning, alone this time. I apologize for the intrusion, he said, but there's been a development I thought you should know about immediately. Amber stood, Rex waking instantly at her movement. What kind of development? Wright approached, his face grave. The Pentagon team analyzing your black box data, they found something else. Communication records from the night of your mission. Someone on base was transmitting your flight path to an outside source. The words hit like physical blows. You're saying someone wasn't just sabotaging my aircraft. They were feeding my location to the enemy. That's exactly what I'm saying. The ambush your convoy faced wasn't random. It was targeted. They knew exactly when and where you'd be. Wright's jaw tightened. Captain Hayes, this wasn't just attempted murder. This was a coordinated operation involving someone with high-level access. Who? Who has that kind of access? That's what we need to find out. And we need to find out quickly, because whoever it is may still be in a position to cause harm. Wright pulled out his phone as it buzzed. He read the message and his face went pale. What is it? The analysis team. They've narrowed down the list of personnel who had access to both your aircraft and the communication systems that night. He looked up at her. There were only 7 people. 3 are deceased, 2 have been cleared through other investigations. And the other 2? One of them is currently deployed overseas. We're working to bring him in for questioning. Wright paused. The other is someone you know, someone who was stationed at Nellis until recently. Who? I can't reveal that yet. Not until we have more evidence. But I can tell you this, they transferred out 6 months ago, right around the time we recovered your black box, like they knew we were getting close. Amber felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Someone she knew, someone she had trusted, worked with, maybe even called friend, someone who had looked her in the eye while planning her death. I want to help, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Whatever it takes, whatever you need, I'm in. I was hoping you'd say that. Wright pocketed his phone. Report to my office tomorrow at 1400 hours as planned. We'll read you in on everything we have. And, Captain, he held her gaze, watch your back. If this person learns you're involved in the investigation, you could become a target again. I've been a target before, yes, but this time, we know it's coming. He glanced at Rex. Take care of each other. He left, and the bar fell silent once more. Amber stood in the middle of Wings and Wheels, surrounded by empty tables and fading memories of the evening's chaos. Rex pressed against her leg, a warm and constant presence. Well, buddy, she said softly, kneeling to look into his eyes. Looks like retirement's over. Rex's tail wagged slowly. His tongue lolled out in what might have been a smile. Someone tried to kill us. Someone we probably trusted. And now we have to find them before they try again. She scratched behind his ears. You ready for one more mission? The sound Rex made wasn't quite a bark, more like an affirmation, a vocalization she hadn't heard in 5 years. The sound of a working dog accepting an assignment. Amber rose and walked to the bar's entrance, Rex limping faithfully at her side. She pushed open the door and stepped into the Nevada night. The desert stretched endlessly around her, stars scattered across the sky like shrapnel from some cosmic explosion. In the distance, she could hear the rumble of jets taking off from Nellis, the sound she'd fallen asleep to for so many years. She looked down at Rex, then up at the sky. Okay, partner, let's find out who wanted us dead. Rex barked once, sharp, clear, determined. And somewhere in the darkness, in an office or a barracks or a home that looked perfectly ordinary, someone who had thought their secret was safe felt a chill run down their spine. They didn't know it yet, but Ghost Rider was back. And this time, she wasn't flying alone. Amber reached into her pocket and touched the photograph Caleb had given her. The image of her broken body on a stretcher, Rex draped across her chest like a living shield. She thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The mission that nearly killed her, the years of hiding, the bar where she'd sought anonymity, the cruelty of young pilots who didn't know better, the kindness of veterans who remembered what service meant. And now, the revelation that her survival hadn't been luck at all. It had been defiance. Someone had wanted her dead, and she had refused to die. She smiled, and it was the smile of a pilot climbing into a cockpit, focused, determined, ready. Time to fly, she whispered. The stars wheeled overhead. The jets roared in the distance, and Ghost Rider walked into the night, her faithful partner at her side, ready to face whatever waited in the shadows. The hunt was on. What you've just witnessed isn't merely a tale of hidden identity revealed. It's a mirror held up to our own assumptions, our quick judgments, our tendency to measure worth by appearance alone. Every day we pass people whose battles remain invisible, the quiet coworker who survived combat, the elderly neighbor who once saved lives, the stranger on the bus carrying scars we'll never see. We categorize them by their jobs, their clothes, their age, never pausing to wonder what storms they have weathered to stand where they stand. The lesson here is devastatingly simple. Respect costs nothing, but cruelty leaves permanent marks. Connor Mills will spend years replaying that night, remembering how he kicked a dog who had saved his pilot's life, how he mocked a woman whose courage eclipsed anything he'd ever known. And Rex, faithful, broken, magnificent Rex, teaches us that loyalty doesn't calculate odds. It doesn't ask what's convenient. It simply stays, even when staying means suffering. So, here's my challenge to you. Tomorrow, when you encounter someone society has deemed ordinary, a waitress, a janitor, a security guard, pause. Look them in the eye. Offer kindness without requiring credentials. Because heroes rarely wear capes. They wear aprons, they carry mops, they limp on wounded legs but never stop protecting those they love. Be the person who sees. Be the person who respects. Be the person who never has to apologize for cruelty they chose to inflict. The world has enough Connors. What it needs is more witnesses who speak up, more Calebs who remember, more hearts willing to recognize that every soul carries a story worth honoring.